Guys, today I'm really excited because we're going to be taking this Traxxas Maxx Slash and turning it into the world's first Max Truggy. What allows us to do this is that the front and rear end are supposedly the same as the Traxxas Maxx, so I'm going to take the front and rear end off my Traxxas Maxx, and we're going to graft it onto this longer chassis, put some big tires on it, try to find a body that'll fit it, then we're going to take this thing for a blast. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. I'm also going to answer some of your questions. The first one is, why didn't I put different tires on here? Larger tires or tires with better traction? And I'm not sure that's really going to help this truck have better performance and handling. These tires already don't have the best traction, and if I put tires on here that had better traction, this thing's going to want to traction roll even more. Also, you can't really put larger tires on here because they're going to hit the body even more than these do, and they're going to rub really badly. Which brings me to the next question, which is suspension tuning. Could you tune this truck to handle better? And the question is almost certainly yes. However, I think this thing has the same basic problem that the Traxxas Maxx does, and that's a fundamental problem with the suspension design that's going to prevent it from handling as well as some competition no matter what you do with it. I tried going with softer springs and thinner shock fluid on this one, but it caused it to traction roll even worse, which is what you would expect. Which brings me to my next suggestion and question. The question being, are these arms the same as the Traxxas Maxx V1? I don't have one to directly compare it to, but given that you can use the steel CVDs from the Traxxas Maxx V1, I suspect they are, and I'm pretty sure the only difference is they added this hole here for the optional sway bars. Personally, I don't think the sway bars should be optional. I think they should be standard on this because I think it would handle a lot better with them. Next, I had several people ask me about this servo horn and steering link. There are a lot of servo horns and steering links that don't fit properly. These are made by Hot Racing, and looking at them, it appears as though I didn't have to modify them. I have had ones in the past from different brands that I did have to modify, and this actually does have a little bit of clearance issue right here at the servo, but it's not enough to actually cause any trouble. We are going to go ahead and swap this servo saver into the other front module, so I'm going to have to pull it back out of here. It'll be easier to get this servo saver out with this front module off. Let's go ahead and finish pulling it off. And here we get our first opportunity to compare the front modules. They do look very similar, though it looks like this bottom skid is thicker here as it extends back further. I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem for assembly or not. It's a little hard to tell here, but you can also see how much wider this wide kit is. With how long this thing's going to be, we might have to add some hex extenders onto these axles to make this thing the correct proportions. I get the feeling this thing's going to become a pretty large 1/8 scale truck when we're done. Removing this reminds me of another question I've gotten, and this is something I get quite often, and that is, what aluminum parts should we put onto a truck and what parts shouldn't we put onto a truck? I think things like this steering rack are just fine, and hubs and knuckles can be okay. The most important thing you want to keep plastic are your control arms. The reason you want to do that is in a crash, that control arm needs to be able to flex to smooth out the shock impulse and protect what it's attached to. If this arm can't flex in a crash, basically it's going to transfer that energy without any smoothing into whatever it's attached to, probably bending or breaking that. You also want to be aware of the weight of the vehicle. Anything you do to increase the weight of the vehicle is going to make it more likely to get damaged in a crash just because it has more mass, and that equals more energy. Okay guys, moment of truth. Does it fit? Well, it seems to fit just fine, though I suspect we might have a problem with that center skid. Nothing we can't take care of, though. Now, speaking of aluminum upgrades, I want to talk about the great debate that really has been brought up by this truck, and that is plastic versus aluminum. The Maxx Slash obviously is almost entirely made from plastic, and a lot of people don't like that, especially given the price, but I want to say that plastic definitely has its place in this hobby, and it's come a long way since the days of the T-Max and other vehicles like that. Modern plastics are really, really good, and they definitely shouldn't be discounted in a basher, especially given that it does cost a lot to make these plastic injection molds. Whether or not you prefer plastic or aluminum is really a personal choice, but the main advantage to plastic is it can usually take a little bit more force before it fails. The disadvantage is when it does fail, it will fail catastrophically, as opposed to aluminum that fails by bending, and you can usually either bend it back or just keep going. That being said, plastic is cheaper to replace. Front end is on, and this is gonna be a big boy. I cannot wait to see what bodies fit this thing. Let's go ahead and get the back done. In the previous video, we ran this truck on 8S, and I had a couple people mention that this motor is not 8S capable, and they're absolutely correct. That being said, the main thing that causes a motor not to be capable of handling a certain voltage is its maximum RPM. Above a certain RPM, the centrifugal forces are just too much and it will physically blow the motor apart. As long as you're careful, you can overvolt a motor, but you also need to pay attention to your temps and make sure that it's not getting too hot because you are going to be putting more energy through it. I'm not saying I recommend doing it, but I have done it before and it is technically possible. We're going to be running bigger tires on this, so I'm not going to mess with the gearing for now. I also had some people asking me if this Hobbywing Max 6 ESC will be better on 6S than the stock BXL 6S, and I'm gonna say yes. I've had quite a bit of experience with this in the past on other vehicles, and this one now as well, and it is a more powerful ESC. It's not gonna be a monumental difference, but there will be a difference. The front module uses all the same screws, but be careful on the rear module, they're all different. And again, comparing the rear modules, we can see they're basically the same. The only difference is this skid plate extends down, which is probably gonna be a problem putting that center skid in, but we'll address that in just a minute. All right, let's see if this fits together. Uh-oh, maybe not. Okay, we have our first interference issue. Looks like this skid might need to be modified to fit in this chassis. Let me just take it off for now. See how these screws have a bunch of dirt in them? If I were to just jam this driver in here and hit the button, it would almost certainly strip these out. That's why it's always important to take a little pick and clear out any dirt that's jammed up in these screws. Dirt being jammed in the heads of screws is one of the main reasons why screws get stripped. While I'm pulling this skid plate off, if you're enjoying this video and you want to see more videos like this, now's a fantastic time to get subscribed, hit that bell to get notified, and let me know what you think of this down in the comments. I answer every single comment. All right, let's see if it fits now. There we go, no problem. We can address those skid plates in a minute. And of course, don't forget your center drive shaft, like I almost did. That leads me to a great thing I wanted to mention. I've had some people ask me how I'm able to do these kinds of modifications, do big builds, and still be able to keep track of everything. The reality is I don't. I make mistakes all the time, and everybody will. The most important thing to remember is that it will happen, it's not a big deal, and just keep on moving. And there we go, guys, a complete sliding chassis, the world's first Max Truggy. Let's see if we can get those skid plates to work. So hopefully this skid plate will fit and we won't have to do any modifications. Looks like it fits just fine. Wonderful. I think we could get away with the stock front skid, but we might as well go ahead and swap it out. The front skid extends out a little bit further than the stock one, but I think it'll be more compatible with the center skid, so we're gonna go ahead and use it. And the center skid should just fit right on. Just like that. And there we have the front and rear of a Max, but the smooth center of a Truggy. I had several people ask me about this battery tray. This is basically a Sledge battery tray, but let me give you the exact dimension. This tray is gonna be about 60 millimeters wide, about 190 millimeters long, and you can get away with batteries that are about 47 millimeters high, maybe a tiny bit higher if you wanna squeeze them in there. That's the basic chassis done. Now we need to figure out wheels and tires. Before we do that, I think this thing's gonna be too narrow for how long it is, so I think we need to put some Hex Extenders on. I've got these really nice M2C ones, which should give us about 5 millimeters per side. I've often been asked if Hex Extenders are okay to use, and I'll say yes as long as they're not too extreme, just so long as you keep in mind that you are changing the steering geometry by pushing the wheels further out from the center of steering rotation, and you're gonna put more stress on your hubs and knuckles as well as your bearings. I'll go ahead and do the rest of these off camera, as you've seen me do it before. Let's go find some tires for this beast. We've got a bunch of options out here. I was thinking about using full-size backflips or even backflip LPs, but I think maybe these Red Cat Kaijus might be just the ticket. Let's try them on. I think that looks pretty good. Let's get the rest of them put on. Guys, this thing looks absolutely awesome and is every bit as big as a standard 1/8 scale Truggy. Just look at this thing next to the Team Corrali Kagama. This Kagama is exactly the same size as a Kraton, which means this Max is the same size as a Kraton. We could probably get away with some bigger tires, but I want to try these smaller ones first because this drivetrain really isn't designed for this kind of weight, and I don't want to break anything right off the bat. Let's see what bodies will fit on here. Obviously, this Traxxas Maxx body will hook into the front, but is a little bit too short in the rear, and I believe that the longer Traxxas Maxx body would also be too short in the rear because this center section is longer. That being said, we can kind of push it over though, and I do have these straps that I can use to hook it onto these Nerf bars. Let me see if that'll work. Speaking of testing, let's get this thing out in the dirt, see how fast it is, and see how well this 1/8 scale MaxXRT Truggy actually works. All right, there she is, the MaxXRT 1/8 scale Truggy. Let's see just how fast this thing is. Seems pretty stable. Ooh, okay, definitely wants to wheelie. I think we're gonna be wheelie limited here. Pretty quick though. Handles pretty well too. All right, I think that's max speed. Let's bring it in and see. 48 miles an hour, that's not too bad. Faster than the Maxx Slash and definitely a lot more stable. Let's see how she bashes. Guys, so far this thing's absolutely awesome, but let's put some big tires on it and see what it can really do. Guys, this thing is absolutely incredible. Durability of a Max, handling of a Truggy, stuntable, a ton of fun. I think Traxxas really needs to build one of these. I don't think they're going to though, because this would directly compete with the Sledge, and this might be better than the Sledge. So what do you need if you want to build one of these? Well, you've got a few different routes you can go. If you've got a Max, you're going to need a Max Slash main chassis, as well as all 3 Max Slash skids, and then whatever body you want. That Max V1 body with those retention straps held on really, really well. You'll also need the Sledge battery hold down, though I would recommend just getting an aftermarket one if you're going to have to pay the money for one. Now, if you've got a Max Sledge, you're going to need the wide kit. I would recommend getting the steel CVDs. You're going to need the bumpers, front and rear, and wheelie bar from the Max, and that's about it. If you've got both, you can just take the modules off of the Max, put them on the Max Slash. You'll have to swap over those skid plates, but that's about it. So overall, this is a fairly straightforward conversion, and I expect to see a lot of people doing this because this is an awesome basher. If you enjoy seeing videos like this, make sure you get subscribed. We do them here all the time. Let me know what you think about this thing down in the comments, then check out one of these videos.